So this is the bag sort video for the second bag inside the row G pack. So we've got row G8 through G13 on this video. So I have my book. We're going to start here with G8. I've gone through here and marked which ones have modifications like G9 and things like that. So when we get to those, we will turn to the booklet for the sort, because that's what the pieces are lined up for. So that would be the first one for this section in the bag. So the next thing to do is to dump out my bag. So the first thing I see, I've got some shapes here that are not indicative of this first block. So I'm going to try to just pile these up based on size and shape, just to give them in a general pile here. We've got some angle pieces, rectangles, teeny tiny triangles. Those are going to be fun. So yeah, it's just a matter of sorting through, and then as I find pieces that match, I can lay them out here on G8. That one's too big, so let me start getting some of these into some piles here. So I've got my pieces sorted into piles of things. I did notice some of the squares here. There's a square here that's slightly smaller. Every now and then, if it's not quite the right size in the book, then it really is the piece. But in this case, they match exactly. So make sure you don't use the wrong squares that are for another block. So I've got those ready to go, and I've got my diamonds as well. I just got to find my triangles yet, and when I do my triangles, I'm going to take one size of them and I put them right next to the corner or the flat edge here, and I line them up. So clearly that's not correct, so I'm going to try to sort through those and find the rest of my pieces. So I've got all my pieces, they fit exactly to the lines. So now I'm going to go through and label all of them G8. So I've got all of my pieces labeled G8. Next thing to do is to label my focus fabric ones, and that's going to be all these inside diamonds. So I'm just going to put a red dot on each one of those. And if I had a directional fabric, I would want to account for that. I had a stripe for the one I made before, so I made an arrow out from the center so that when I had them in a bag, I would just throw them on my fabric in the appropriate way. So I'm going to go ahead and bag these up, and we'll move on to the next block. Next up is G9, and G9 is a modified block, so we're going to go to the booklet. They've just changed this kind of corner in here into an arrow piece. So the pieces that we have in the kit are going to match this drawing, not this one. I'm going to go ahead and dig through to see about matching my triangles and the square and my little arrow pieces. All right, so I've been sorting my triangles. There's some large triangles that are obviously for the outside section of the flying geese. So I've set those 4 up here. Then there's 20 triangles that will cover these 6 up here, these 6 here, and then there's 2 on the flying geese on each side. So that's 16. But then there's 4 in the center here, and they're not the same size, but they're almost the same size. Now here's what I do when I do my triangles. I will line these up, and then I will make the points touch at the top, and in theory, the points will touch on the bottom here, okay? That's all these, plus this one is 16 of that exact same match. Now there's 4 that if you make the points touch, you will see a stair step right here. It is very minor, and it may not matter to you, and it may not matter in the long run, but every now and then it matters. Especially when you're assigning this. This is an on-point assembly. We're going to do this, and we're going to assemble these 3, and then these 3, and these 3 when we go to assemble this center block, as opposed to these that are getting assembled on the hypotenuse. And every now and then it matters, and every little bit there's 4 of these that are that far off. So if you add that little bit times 4 in a 4.5 inch block, it can add up quite quickly. So what I'm gonna do, the other thing I looked at is how these lay. So if you look at this one and you position it exactly right, it will cover exactly half of the lines of the thickness of the lines of this drawing. If you put this one here, it will fit, but it will not cover any of the black. That's how you know it's slightly smaller. And then this one is the slightly bigger one. This one covers covers all of the lines. And so when you're dealing with the pamphlet, you want the one that is going to split the line in half, because if you think about it, when the laser was cutting these, the actual cut is going to be right in the middle of this thickness between these two pieces. So that's going to be these 4 right here. Those 4 are the ones that are just slightly smaller. And when I label them, I'm going to label them with a letter, a number, whatever, to distinguish them from the other 16. Because when I go to dump this out of my bag and put it on my fabric, I'm not going to want to measure them again. I could, but I'd rather not spend the time. So I'm going to put some kind of distinction on these 4 once I get these laid out. But right now, I got to find these arrow pieces and this one little square, and then I can lay out my block. All right, so this is why we do this video. There's no arrow pieces in here. I didn't think I saw them when I was sorting, but I went through all of my pieces again. They're not in here. What is in here is rectangles that fit exactly here, and the smallest triangles you have ever seen until you get to I row maybe, but these are teeny tiny. Now granted, there's a couple that are different sizes. You've got these are smallest, then there's this one, then there's this one, and if you're looking at your same page, the little triangles are gonna, these are actually 2 different sizes. We'll get to that in a minute. But you can take this and see if it fits in either one of these, and it's a little too small for this one, but it does fit up here, and it's way too big for the end of this. It makes like a little house. So that's not it. The smallest triangles, there's 4 teeny tiny triangles in here. That's what's going to make this arrow. I don't know why they put a modification in and then ended up cutting the tips off, but that's just how it works. So there's that. And so you're going to have to put these together. Now, if you would like, and I might actually do this, I don't know. I'll have to decide when I get to putting it on fabrics and stuff. If you would like, you can take a recipe card or a cardstock or whatever and trace this out, okay? And then make your own 4 pieces that are solid arrows, because that's going to be a lot easier than dealing with these little tiny triangles. These are bad enough, but I'm probably going to come back, and when I get to my block prep, this is just the bag sort. So, but anyway, so this is what the bag is, okay? So make sure you've got your rectangle that fits. There's a lot of rectangles in here. Most of all the rest of them are wider and or shorter / longer. And I'm making a mess here. So let me get this all laid out and fixed up. But I wanted to point those little tiny triangles out to you. So I've got all my pieces laid out. The criticalness of these smaller triangles, these slightly smaller triangles, is even more important now that they're against a rectangle of the same exact size. So make sure that you put the right triangles in the center. So now I'm going to go through here and label all of my pieces G9, including these little teenies. So I've labeled all of my pieces G9. Now I'm going to label my focus fabrics, which in this case is the darker fabrics. Now because these are separate pieces, you can then make them separate fabrics. So if you do decide to make these one arrow piece, then it will be obviously one fabric. So I may actually leave it with these little minuscule tiny triangles, But I'm going to go ahead and label these focus fabric. Oh, and I missed a... I'm going to go ahead and label these. Got this one, this one, this one. And then these inside here. And these outside triangles, outside triangles, outside triangles, inside 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the tiny, tiny, tiny ones and the square in the center are focus fabric. Now, the other thing I need to do before I swipe these off is label these 4 triangles. I'm going to just use the letter A in a ballpoint pen so it looks a little differently. But the difference is here, if I do these 4, okay, now I can bag it, but I'm going to put it on here, put this A on here so I know what it means when I come to assemble and go, why are these, because it may be a while before I get to this block, I'm not sure. So I want to make sure that it's as clear as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and bag this up, and then we can get to this next one, which looks like it has a ton of pieces. Now we're up to G10, and G10 has a lot of pieces. They have all these little tiny triangles. If I can put them in my hand without putting them on the floor, okay? And then you've got all these kinds of rectangles and whatnots. So the biggest thing is that, as I mentioned in the last block, these are different sizes. So that one's too big for A, so it must be for B. So I'm going to label these when I get them in here. Are these for this? No. So in theory, these are all the same size. Okay. These 2 are the same size, and these 2 are the same size. So there's going to be some differences here. So let's go ahead and get those around. And then we've got a bunch of different sizes of rectangles that we're going to deal with as well. So let me get all these laid out. So I've got all of my G10 pieces laid out. Now I'm going to label them all with G10, including these little tiny end pieces. Got all of them labeled G10. Now I'm going to label my focus fabrics, and that's going to be this zigzag pattern in here. So we're going to have these. I'm going to fling triangles apparently. I'm going to be careful of that. I have this that goes down this way, then across this way, and then this is to poke out. I don't want to get them all tangled up yet until I'm done labeling them. And this, so let me see. So these should be background. All of the triangles are background. Okay, then I have ends here. This end with this end is what I labeled as A. So I'm going to label A. That looks like a 4. A, and then B and B, because they're so close in size. So I'll know where those go, and I'll bag this up, and then we can move on to the next block. On to G11. G11 is going to be a 9-patch block with 4 diamonds, and I have my 4 diamonds. I believe these are the 4 diamonds. And then it's a matter of, okay, so they're not going to be the same. These are the only diamonds that are in here. They're not going to be the same exact shape, but they're all consistent to each other, so when you make the block, you're not going to notice any difference. So I'll set those over here, and then I'm going to find these pieces that fill this space. I'm sure this is probably the centerpiece. And let's get these all laid out. So I've got all of my G11 pieces laid out, and I'm going to label them now. So I got my blocks labeled G11. Now we're going to label focus fabric, and our focus fabric is going to be the X of the 9-patch. So that's these 5 blocks and the diamonds, because they're going to be appliqued onto the background blocks as well. If you have a directional fabric, now's the time to indicate direction that you want to put it in. And I'm going to go ahead and bag this up and move on to the next block. Next is G12, and G12 is a modified block, so we're going to go into the booklet that's included with the kit, and we're going to work from this layout. So there are two different kinds of diamonds here. You've got longer and shorter ends. They're alternated, and then we've got all these angled ends, and then there's 4 triangles, which I believe are probably these, since they seem to be the only ones I have left. And then you've got these trapezoidal pieces here that I've got marked up. So I'm gonna go ahead, and we've got little kite pieces, and then diamonds, and so on. So let me get these laid out. So I've got my G12 laid out, and now I'm gonna label the pieces. Okay, now we're gonna label the focus fabric. We're gonna look at the picture here. So the border around outside here is gonna all be focus fabric, and then the center star. If you have a directional fabric like a stripe, it's kind of fun to do that in a fan effect on this one. But we're gonna label the border. And then, oh, don't forget that one. And then the center section here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, 1. Okay. I am going to bag this up, and we're going to go to the last block of the bag. G13 is the last block, so we've got all the pieces left over should be on this block. So we've got little half moons, and then we've got little things with the half moons cut out of them, which clearly goes here, and some squares left. So let me get these laid out. Now I'm going to label these for the G13 block. Now I've got to label the focus fabric. The focus fabric is going to be the center section plus all of the little half moon shapes, and then the 4 corners. If you've got a directional fabric, you want to label it now. And I'm going to bag this one up, and this concludes the bag 2 bag sort for row G.